Welcome back, folks. It's that time of year where we need to go down in the root cellar and do a little maintenance, and we'll show you what we mean by maintenance in the root cellar. Hey there, welcome to our root cellar. We're putting away these beans that we canned the other day. So while I'm down here, we're going to do a little root cellar maintenance after we get these beans put down here on the shelf. If you remember from our last couple videos ago, we ran out of beans, so we had to can some more up, because it's pretty handy to have some pre-cooked beans ready to go for supper. It makes for a really quick meal, whether we're doing Mexican or some chili or whatever. I always keep my boxes so I can put my empty jars back in them. So let's show you what we got going on here. So up here's where I keep all my jars, and we separate them by size. We start with quart jars down there. We got wide mouth, narrow mouth. We've got some bigger jars, but I just store them down there, some half-gallon jars. But we have some 1.5 pint jars, which are not very common. Pint jars, and then we get down into the smaller half pints and jelly jars. But here's our pantry if you haven't seen it. We did a good job in the garden this year. So what we're going to do for maintenance is we're going to go through all of our winter squash, and we're going to see if we have any that have any issues, and we're going to cull those out. So we got our crate. I like getting these crates to store all of our root vegetables in and summer squash, because they stack nice and they aerate really well. So let's start down here on this end with our pumpkins. Got a little soft spot right here on this pumpkin, which means it's going. So that pumpkin needs to go. These are all still nice and firm. Good to go. We'll check our butternut squash. Look at the size of that thing. It's crazy. So we're just going through and checking, making sure that everything's still nice and firm. These winter squash store really well, these butternut squash. Everything's pretty good in that crate. We have, looks like, one of our mashed potato squash getting soft spots in it, so that one needs to go. These other two are still nice and firm. Probably have to cook both of those at the same time. They're kind of small. But more butternut squash. These last a long time. You'll still be eating these when the new ones are ready in the garden, because we got them down here in the root cellar where it stays basically 52 degrees all year. Alright, to our acorn squash. Really nice acorn squash. Oop, bad spot. All the rest of those are real good. So I got 2 more crates of acorn squash to check. I won't bore you with that. And then we'll get to some of our root vegetables. So, with all of our pumpkins and squash all the way down here, we've only had 3 that we had to cull. So that's fantastic. Our Yukon Gold potatoes down here are still looking good. They're not sprouting or anything. However, our onions from the garden have all sprouted. You can see those down there. Now, if we lived anywhere in the country where you could still work the ground, we could put these in the ground and get some green onions out of them. But here in Nebraska, the ground is frozen this time of year, and you can't even stick a shovel in it. So we're out of luck on those. I may let them stay here and see what they look like in a couple months when the ground starts to thaw. Maybe we can get something out of them, but I think they're too far along to think that anything's going to happen with these other than they'll probably just get thrown out. We don't have any hogs or anything to give them to. Now, I know some people would say to cut these sprouts up and use them in a dish, but I probably won't do that either. Now, our red potatoes starting to sprout. Some of those are still usable. You just knock the sprouts off of them as long as they're still firm. But again, with these, if we had workable ground, we could shove these babies in the ground and that'll be our potatoes for the next year. So if you live in a climate, even though you got frost or whatever, put those in the ground and mulch them up real good, and those will be this year's potatoes. So that's it down here in the root cellar. So let's go back upstairs. We brought one of our butternuts up for dinner. Can't wait, that's going to be delicious. A little brown sugar, a little butter. We'll bake that in the oven. Maybe we'll show you how to do that. Super easy. So we never had a root cellar until we moved here to Nebraska. And luckily, the family that built this house, they incorporated a root cellar because back in the day, you had to have one. Most of their food came off of the property through gardening and other means. So you had to have a root cellar to keep your stuff, your vegetables and all that from turning on you. So being down in the ground like that, and there's no conditioned air into that room, it's sealed off from the rest of the house. It stays pretty much low 50s all year round. Make a good wine cellar too, I guess. I do have some wine vinegar down there that's in the process. But you had to have it, and we've never had one before, so it's really nice to have one. Now, if you don't have a root cellar, a lot of people here in Nebraska had these storm shelters outside. And through more modern construction, they really don't use the storm shelters anymore. And those storm shelters were built into the ground with just a stairway coming up out of them into the yard. So if you got one of those, that would be a perfect root cellar. Clean it up, sweep the cobwebs out, get all the creepy crawlies out of there, put you in some shelving, and you got you a root cellar. It would work really well. My aunt and uncle had one on their property that was pretty cool, but they never used it. So that's another option. So it's getting close to dinner time. Kelly's going to be home. How about we cook this butternut squash? First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to wash it, because I don't wash them coming in from the garden. I don't want to take off any protective coating that the squash may have on its own. So we're going to wash this up. We'll cut the end of it off, probably maybe both ends, and then we're going to cut it long ways, and then we'll clean all the seeds out. We'll show you what that looks like inside of this butternut squash. So we've cut our butternut squash long ways, and use a pretty good sturdy knife for that, because the shell on these is really hard. A little tiny kitchen knife might not do the trick, and you want to keep your fingers out of the way. I usually just stand it up and force the knife down through it. Now you see the seeds in the seed cavity. We've already saved all the seeds we need to save this year. So take you a nice sturdy spoon, and just like carving pumpkins, you're going to knock all this stuff out and just put it into a bowl. Get all the stringy stuff out, scrape real hard with that spoon. Get all that stuff off the wall of the squash. And then most of it comes out. I'm going to scrape, when I'm done here, I'll scrape that a little bit harder to get all of this stringy stuff out. But you get the picture. Isn't that beautiful? So we're ready for the oven. That's all there is to it. Some people you'll see will put olive oil on it, salt, pepper, all that. I don't season it till it's on my plate, kind of like baked potatoes or something like that. I'll put whatever. If I'm going to stay savory, I'll do salt, pepper, and butter, which is good if you've never tried that. But sometimes I like going sweet with a little butter and brown sugar. And even with that, I'll add a little bit of salt. So some people will put some herbs in with the mix, whatever you like. So 350 degrees. And that's all there is to it. We're going to pop this in the oven. We're going to start checking it at about an hour. You want it so you can take a fork and just shove a fork into the flesh real easy. And then bring it out and let it cool for a little bit. And then just scoop it right out of those shells. Those shells will stay semi-hard, not too hard. But it'll be super easy to scrape the flesh out of those shells. So we'll show you what it looks like when it comes out of the oven. Now some people you'll see like cooking those in a little pan of water with the flesh side down, which is fine. But I like a little texture on mine. So like when the top of it gets a little brown and dry, that adds a little kind of a crunchy texture for me that I really enjoy. So that's why I cook them this way, just like our baked vegetables. There she is. She's all done. You can see how a fork just pierces it real nicely. Ready to scoop out of there for dinner. So remember, get down there in that root cellar and cull out your stuff that needs to go. Wasn't it Donny Osmond said back in the day, don't let one bad apple spoil the whole bunch, baby? That's an old song. I'm dating myself with that one. So, till next time, stay safe, stay healthy, grow some winter squash because it's a great thing to put in your root cellar and it will be there when you need it. It'll get you through some hard times if you have some. So, love you guys. Catch you later.